I know we're going about to start Memorial Day tomorrow, and I wanted to read about some warriors in the Bible. A lot of times we forget what people actually go through. So I wanted to speak on and read Psalms 142. We find here that King David, well, he wasn't king yet. And he already killed a lot of people. He already killed Goliath. He's killed a bear, lion, all these other animals, stayed out in the woods. So he already attacked all these other things to do what was right. But still, fear has a tendency of coming up in us whenever we get depressed and everything starts coming at us when we're out there in the middle of fighting. Courage has never been the absence of fear. But courage is always the willingness to stand and do what's right, even though you have the fear. To me, that's what we do when we think about memorial. We think about all the men and women that sacrificed everything. Some of them, they volunteered. But there was a lot. They had no choice. But yet, they did what they knew was right, even though they had fear. We think of King David, we don't think about fear, do we? As many people as he went and he slaughtered in the name of God. All the fights that he went through, everything that he accomplished. The very first thing we read about is Goliath, this big giant that all the soldiers were scared of. And he was able to go out there and say, no, in the name of God, he's going to go down because he's threatening God's people. But I want you to listen to the words of Psalms chapter 142. It says, well, here is a meskel or a poem or a song of David when he was in the cave. Now, he was hiding in the caves. Around Judith would have been a whole pile of caves over there, and that's where he was hiding in. But it says, I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, thou didst know my path and the way where I walk. They have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. I cried out to thee, O Lord. I said, thou art my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison, so that I may give thanks to thy name. The righteous will surround me, for thou wilt deal bountifully with me. Now, if you wrap your head around the actual words he's talking to, crying means to proclaim, to let out, that he's petitioning the Lord for a rescue, because in his mind, he has everybody's against him. He doesn't know who he can trust. He's saying there's that everybody around him, nobody cares about him. But keep in mind that during this time, there was a lot of people around him. He had a lot of soldiers around him willing to die for him. Those soldiers hiding all in this cave around him. But still, he's saying, nobody cares for my soul. See, a lot of times we forget whenever we look at people that's in power, or we look at people in leadership, we look at people that's over us, whether it's a pastor or whether it's a governor or whoever. And we forget that they're people as well. We forget that they need support. We forget that they need prayer, and they need to know that they have hope as well. They have people on their side. Because a lot of times, everything in life starts clouding on them just like it does everyone else. And we find whenever it's down there at the end, He says, bring my soul out of prison. He wasn't in prison. He was in a cave right now. But one of the things I just now learned this past week is they say that if you think of the body as like a computer, like everything working together, then the mind would be the hardware of the soul, where everything is actually processed through. So whenever we think about certain things, when we think about the negative effects that it has on us and everything getting to us, then it affects how we perceive and how we look at things. You can think, for instance, this man and woman, husband and wife, going on a long trip. They went to a service station one day during that trip. And the service attendant went out there and cleaned the windshield. The man was getting aggravated. It's like, it's not clean. Clean the windshield. You know, you don't know how to clean it, so the man cleaned it again, and by this time the man was getting, I asked you to clean the windshield. It's still dirty. What's going on? By the time the wife reached over and took his glasses off and cleaned them and put back on, it's like, oh, the windshield's clean. A lot of times we look through the things within our own self, and it affects how we see others and the situations around us. David was realizing that in himself here. He was realizing the depression. He was realizing how he felt, because when you look at someone on your right hand, that's the ones you can go to. That's the ones that's your strong arm. That's the ones where you had your first man there, right? Or woman, ready to fight for you. And it's like, I looked to my right, nobody's there. That's why he said to the right. But then another place we find that he said that God's always there to your right. I believe it was Psalms 116 that he says that. He's my right hand. He's the one that protects me. He's the one that comforts me. He's the one that goes with me through this. So when he was overwhelmed with everything in this world, that's when he turns to the one that he knows will never leave him. Not just for a spiritual uplifting, but he was turning to him for earthly as well. It says, give heed to my cry in verse 6. Please listen to me. I'm crying out. I'm calling out for help. It says, for I am brought very low. He realizes where he is inside. He says, deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. I can't take it no more. A lot of times we want to do everything on our own, inside, no matter who we are. And it hurts to ask for help. It hurts to open up to people, because then, one, a lot of times we feel it as a sign of weakness and distress. Two, is that we feel like we can't do it on our own, so it's almost like we failed. And three, a lot of times we don't know who we can trust, which is what David was. He was in all of those right here. It says, bring my soul out of prison. It's mine out of prison. Get me out of this slump. Get me out of this depression that I'm in, so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me. This right here is a physical attribute. Sending your righteous people to comfort me. Sending those around me that will lift me up. For you will dwell bountiful with me. See, whenever God that helps us in those times of depression, he always puts people there that loves him, that loves his heart and loves others. But in order to be those kind of people to care for the ones that he has that's hurting, we have to, one, be looking for it, so we can reach out and help them. There was one psychiatrist, Carl Menninger. Yeah, I had to look at that name. I'm still not sure I said it right. But anyway, he was a psychiatrist that was in he was giving a presentation one day for psychiatric health. And he was taking questions and answers. And one of the questions that was presented to him went like this. It says, what would you advise a person to do if they felt a nervous breakdown coming on? And he's there. He's a famous psychiatrist, and they thought for sure he's going to say, find a psychiatrist, right? because a lot of times that's what we want to tell people to do. But instead he didn't. He was marked as answering the person as this. Tell that person to lock their door, walk across the railroad track and find someone in need, and do something to help that person in need. In other words, a lot of times we have to get our mind off of what's actually bothering us before we get really broke down, and go and see someone else and help them. Gets our mind off the little things and more on the big things. Because everything that we're facing, tomorrow is going to be done. And and we'll carry on from there. No matter what it is, there's going to be an outcome. And we're going to pick up and keep on going. And God already knows the outcome. He's not here just for the pains we're feeling today, but He's going to be there for the outcomes tomorrow that He's already seen, already made preparations for us. We find out with King David something similar happened. In Psalms 1 Samuel. First Samuel chapter 22. That while he was in these caves, his family came. Chapter 22, verse 1. So David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's household heard of it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him, and he became captain over them. Now there were about 400 men with him. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and my mother come and stay with you until I know what God will do for me. Then he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. And the prophet Gad said to David, do not stay in the stronghold, depart and go into the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. Now I want to go one more step, because I'm talking about David, right? And we know he was running from Saul. And right past that we find this. Then Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered. Now Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree, and forgive me for my pronunciation, on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. So he too had soldiers all around him. And Saul said to his servants who stood around him, hear now, O Benjamites, will the son of Jesse also give to all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? For all of you have conspired against me, so that there is no one who discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you who is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in ambush, as it is this day. So we find also that King Saul, the one that's going after David, that he couldn't even count on the ones standing around him. He too was wondering who he could turn to. Not even his own son. He's trying to bribe them with lands and with leadership and power, just to make sure they don't turn on him too. But even with that, he doesn't know if they're going to side with the son. My grandpa used to tell me about World War II. I say he used to tell me. He told me once. It was the only time he mentioned about it, because he had nightmares afterwards. And he used to tell me about how men with dark hair would go to sleep one night and wake up the next morning solid white from fear. How the one standing beside him happened to have his head up, and the bullet went into the Kevlar, and he took his Kevlar off, and the bullet was going around and around the inside. Until the next night when I went to sleep at Lord. Was that same person. They none knew when I was going to be their last night. But yet, they kept on fighting. They kept on going. A lot of them never had to worry about holding a gun like that. If so, it was just for food for the house. They didn't have video games to prepare them for shooting people and stuff. But yet, they were doing it. They were doing it to win a battle against evil. They were doing it to win so we can remain free. Some of it because they were told, some of it because they were ordered and forced. It's just like when my dad went to Vietnam and they came back, all the citizens, they keep forgetting these people that goes overseas. So they were told, the soldiers were ordered to put on civilian clothes because the citizens was saying that they were fighting a political war, and they turned on them and started throwing things at them, persecuting them, the soldiers that had no choice. See, my dad was drafted, he didn't sign up, but he went willingly after he was drafted. Didn't try to hide or get out of it. But people didn't cut their eyes off of that. They always want someone to stand up for them, take up for them, but they're so easy to forget them afterwards. That's what the day's about to me, is remembering the price. And it's not just the soldiers, but it's those that they left behind, the women, the children, the husbands, all of those that didn't know if when they kissed their spouse or their parent goodbye, if it was going to be the last time they ever saw them. They didn't know what was going to happen. That's a lot of depression, a lot of despair. It's just like whenever David's family went to see him, they were in despair. They didn't know what was going to happen. They were seeing everything that Saul was doing. They didn't know if that was going to be the last time they saw their son or saw their brother. But yet they were giving it over to one that could. They were asking God to walk with them through it. Because a lot of times in this life, we get blinded and we get so watered down with the things of this world that we can't see it. Can't see hope. This right here is what we call an emotional chart, emotional wheel. Used in psychology, right? Each color is like a different thing. Like yellow over here is for happy. There's like a lot of different things over for happy. Anger is like the most for the bad side, but most of the wheels for bad. Over here in fearful, you got this next stage where it breaks down about fearful. Those passages that I read to you about King David, let me know if you heard any of these. Scared, anxious, insecure, weak, rejected, threatened. And that sound familiar, what King David was going through? And then after you get through that first stage, then you get to the next stage, right before you break. And that's the more it goes out, the more secure it gets. The harder it is to come back over. The next one is helpless, frightened, overwhelmed, worried, inadequate, inferior, worthless, insignificant, excluded, persecuted, nervous, exposed. And that's all from fear. The more and more it gets us. See, you don't start off being overwhelmed. You start off with a buildup of anxiety, a buildup of being stressed. And then if you can't work that out, you can't figure out a way to deal with it, then it goes to being overwhelmed. And it gets to the part where you're about to break. And that's where he says how his soul was overwhelmed within. His spirit's weak. It's like, I have nothing more. Lord, help me with this. Send me people that care. and that's when his family came, and he had to start taking care of them. So he actually went out of the cave and he traveled with them and took care of them, just like what the other psychiatrist was saying. So why am I saying all this about King David? It's because of King David, the one that we look at, the mighty one that stood against Goliath as a kid with just a sling and a rock. If he went through all of this depression, all this anxiety, all this spiritual overwhelmingness, then that means so can everyone else of us. But just like he said, they knew where this help lies. There's help for each one of us. And it's more than just a spiritual sense. And he calls on us, I believe, to be there for each other. Look for our brothers and sisters that's hurting. Take time just to let them know they're there. They don't have to tell you everything. They don't have to have like, hey, what's going on? Okay, you don't want to tell me? No. Just let them know that you're there. That there's someone that cares about them. And it does the world for them. See, each person, no matter who we are, if you ever saw a canner, pressure cooker, back in the day we liked to put peas in there, boiled peanuts, corn, put our jars in there, seal it up, and let it pressurize and seal, take them out, and they can stay for years. Well, it has a valve on the top where all this pressure gets out when it gets above whatever pressure you set it to, 5, 10, or 15 pounds. If that hole ever gets stopped and builds up everything inside, then that pot will explode at its weakest part. Usually it's the lid, sometimes on the side, but it will never be able to be used again. It will be broke. Each one of us is just like that canister, and we have to have a way to let the pressure out. And that's what I'm hearing from David. Whether it's by talking to someone that's licensed, or someone that's a job, or a friend that's that a way that you can open up to, or whether it's to God himself, and which he's always there, and he'll send you the right person. We all have to have someone we can talk to let that out. Because we're not alone, even though it feels that way. As we remember the ones that's left, let's don't forget to remember the ones that's still here and reach out to the families. Because like I said, the family members back home goes to that same thing. Be there for them as they're hurting, as they're remembering. Just say a little prayer. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about race, it doesn't matter about sex, it doesn't matter about religion. Once we put on a uniform, we're all the same. I'd go one step further and say that even outside the uniform, we're all the same as well. It's just that man likes to divide us by religion, sex, race, culture. But we all require the same thing: hope, love, compassion, air, food. And my Bible says that we're all equal. So let's remember that this Memorial Day and just reach out to someone. Get our eyes off of the political senses of everything and all the divisions, and just love one another. Let them know that we're there for each other.